Hetty journeys to Windsor, where she expects to find Captain Anithern. Although she does not dare write to him, she feels that he will help her when he learns of her predicament. After a short time in the coach, Hetty realizes that her money and valuables will not be enough to carry her to Windsor. She is forced to walk and to catch rides in carts. Hetty is terrified that she will become a beggar woman. Along the way, a farmer picks her up, just as he has picked up a stray dog he found on the road some weeks earlier. When she reaches Windsor, the coachman asks for a tip, but Hetty has so little left, she asks for change, and he tells her never mind. An innkeeper overhears her and takes her in. After learning Hetty's destination, he tells her the address she's going to is all closed up and that the regiment left for Ireland some weeks before. Hetty faints at the news. The innkeeper's wife remarks on what she thinks is the truth of the situation, that Hetty and Captain Anithern were lovers, and now Hetty is pregnant with his child. She says Hetty would have been better served to be less pretty and more well-behaved. Hetty's return journey is miserable. She gives the innkeeper and his wife the earrings Captain Anithern gave her in exchange for a little money. Then she heads in the direction of home, although she does not really intend to go there. On the way, she thinks of going to see Dinah, but she cannot make up her mind to let anyone who knows her see her in this state of shame. Instead, she decides to kill herself. Hetty takes care of her money and eats along the way to where she intends to kill herself because she still clings to life. After finding a pool where she thinks she will drown herself, she is unable to throw herself in. She climbs into a small shelter in a sheep pen, and a shepherd discovers her there in the morning and sends her on her way. In her desperation, she continues on the road toward Dinah, although she is still not sure that that is where she is going. Adam and the Poisters begin to worry about Hetty because she has been gone for so long. Adam decides to go to Snowfield to fetch her and hopefully bring Dinah back with them. He sets out in great spirits, but when he gets to Snowfield, the old woman with whom Dinah lives informs him that Dinah has been on a journey to Leeds and that she has not seen Hetty. Frantic, Adam tries desperately to find some trace of Hetty. After tracking her part of the way to Windsor, Adam loses her and goes back to Haslop. When he gets home, Adam sits in his workshop until Seth finds him. Uncharacteristically, Adam bursts into tears, but he does not tell Seth the whole truth. Adam believes Captain Anithern must have written to Hetty and urged her to come to him. Adam thinks Hetty must not want to marry him and must be running away. Careful not to reveal what he knows about Captain Anithern's affair with Hetty, Adam tells Mr. Poyser that he thinks Hetty wants to get away from the marriage. On the brink of leaving for Ireland, where he knows Captain Anithern to be, Adam decides he must have some help in finding Hetty and decides to tell Mr. Irwine the whole story. When Adam arrives at Mr. Irwine's, there's a visitor with Mr. Irwine. Adam goes in to see him after the visitor leaves and notices that Mr. Irwine is exceptionally agitated. After Adam tells him about the affair and that Hetty is now missing, Mr. Irwine reveals that the visitor has told him that Hetty is in prison for murdering her baby. Mr. Irwine also says that Captain Anithern is on his way home because the squire sent for him 10 days earlier. Adam reacts violently, blaming Captain Anithern and swearing revenge. Mr. Irwine makes him promise to try to help while there is anything to be done, and they agree to go together to Stoniton, where Hetty is being held and will be tried the following week. By omitting certain critical scenes from the narration, Eliot focuses the novel on the reactions of the characters to the main events, rather than on the main events themselves. Two of the most important acts in the book occur outside the narration: the consummation of the affair between Captain Anithern and Hetty, and the death of Hetty's baby. In part, Eliot's choice not to include those scenes may be a choice of discretion. In other words, she may not wish to include a graphic sex scene and may not wish to describe the messy affair of childbirth and the murder of the baby. In both cases, she inserts the events into the novel through Adam. It is Adam who discovers Hetty and Captain Anithern in the woods, and it is to Adam that Mr. Irwine breaks the news of Hetty's imprisonment. By narrating the events in this way, Eliot leaves to the reader's imagination the exact nature of Hetty's seduction by Captain Anithern and the exact level of Hetty's culpability in the death of her child. Eliot also centers the novel on the destruction of Adam's life, choosing to focus on the collateral consequences of these acts rather than on the acts themselves. Although Adam is not directly the victim of either of the two main acts of the novel, he is the only character who feels their repercussions. The focus on Adam, then, encourages the reader to think of evil in terms of what it does to others. Evil becomes more than an abstract concept, and the reader can experience it as a real event. The morality of the novel strives for good behavior not for one's own sake, or even for religious reasons, but rather because it is a social duty. In short, Eliot warns that selfish behavior can hurt others like as has Adam. Looking back, it is clear that Adam's repeated misunderstanding of Hetty's tears shows just how deep his infatuation with her really is and how wrong he has been about her character. Throughout their courtship, Adam consistently sees in Hetty the exact opposite of her real nature, in part because of his nature and in part because of her efforts. There is no question that Hetty makes others think the best of her, even when she is at her most petty and most peevish. Adam falls for her deception over and over. Equally important, however, is that Adam himself chooses to ignore signs that Hetty is not who he thinks she is and allows himself to believe that she is and will be the good woman he wants to marry. The narrator suggests that Adam's foolishness should be totally excused because Adam has fallen for Hetty's youth and beauty. That is probably only half the story, though. Adam sees the best in Hetty because Adam sees the best in everyone, and it is inconceivable to him that a young girl could practice that level of iniquity. Adam underestimates Hetty as much as he overestimates her. He underestimates her ability to be cunning, her intelligence, and her pride while he overestimates her moral fiber. Both misconceptions are important because they both reflect back on Adam. He does not believe a young woman could be so cunning and so pretty at the same time, an idea that becomes especially important when he marries Dinah, who is very intelligent and very pretty. His blindness about Hetty, then, is a balanced blindness, highlighting both the positive and the negative aspects of Adam's character. Mr. Irwine returns to Haslop and learns that the squire has died in the night. At Stoniton, Adam stays to be close to Hetty, even though he cannot bear to visit her. Adam's family and the Poycers are told the news about Hetty from Mr. Irwine. Mr. Poycer is deeply shamed and has no compassion for Hetty, whereas Mrs. Poycer feels sorry for her. They both agree that they want Dinah to come visit to help them deal with the grief. Lisbeth also wants Dinah to come and help and asks Seth to write to Dinah in Leeds. Seth does not know exactly where in Leeds Dinah is but gives what information he has to the Poycers, who send a letter to Dinah. Mr. Massey goes to see Mr. Irwine and asks what he thinks about the case against Hetty. Mr. Irwine says the case against Hetty does not look good, especially since Hetty denies ever having been pregnant when there is evidence against her. When Mr. Massey decides to go stay with Adam in Stoniton, Mr. Irwine warns him to be gentle and not to say anything too harsh about Hetty. Mr. Massey says he will be compassionate and tells Mr. Irwine that he himself was in trouble once, but he does not specify how. Mr. Irwine visits Adam in the room he shares with Mr. Massey in Stoniton. Adam is very pale and haggard, and Mr. Irwine tries without success to comfort him. He tells Adam that Hetty does not wish to see anyone and does not want to see Adam. Mr. Irwine tells Adam that Captain Denithern has not yet returned, that Adam should lay aside his desire for vengeance. He also tells Adam that if Adam killed Captain Denithern, he cannot imagine what the consequences might be, that they might be as dire as the consequences of the affair. He reminds Adam how he felt the night he fought with Captain Denithern. This memory strikes a chord with Adam and calms him. Adam waits in his room while Mr. Massey leaves to see the beginning of the trial. When he returns, Adam asks about the trial. Mr. Massey tells Adam about the testimony of Mr. Poycer, who is terribly upset. He also explains how Mr. Irwine helped Mr. Poycer from the courtroom when Mr. Poycer was close to collapsing. Adam asks about Hetty, who stands alone with no one near her in the courtroom. Mr. Massey says the doctor's testimony was quite persuasive, especially in the face of Hetty's continuing denial that she even had a child. Adam resolves to go watch the trial and stand by Hetty. Everyone notices Adam when he enters the courtroom because he looks so distraught. Taking a seat near Hetty, he looks at her, but she does not notice him. Sarah Stone, a Methodist widow from Stoniton, testifies that Hetty came to her house looking for lodging, and she agreed to take her in because Hetty looked so distraught but was obviously from good stock. During the night, Hetty gave birth to a child, and Miss Stone dressed the child in her own children's clothes. Miss Stone went out the next evening to get some help for Hetty, and Hetty was gone when she returned. Then a man named John Olding, who is a farm laborer from near Stoniton, testifies that he saw Hetty in the fields one morning as he was going out to work. She walked down the road away from him, and when he got to the fields, he thought he heard a baby crying, but he could not find the child. On his way back, he stumbled upon the child's dead body, and he went to the constable for help. When he and the constable returned the next day to the place where he found the body, Hetty was sitting there. She did not move when they approached. The jury convicts Hetty, and the judge sentences her to death by hanging. Hetty screams and passes out when the judge hands down the sentence. In this section, the focus is almost entirely on Adam's despair, nearly to the complete exclusion of Hetty's situation. Because this novel is mostly about Adam and not Hetty, the story centers on his ability to cope with sorrow. Until Adam goes to the courtroom to watch the trial, Hetty is physically absent from the action of this part of the novel. Although she is ever present through Adam's obsession with her well-being, her own thoughts and feelings about her trial are really not important here. Everyone at the trial notices Adam, and the reader is meant to notice him as well. Hetty will make a brief but important appearance when Dinah goes to visit her in jail and effect her conversion, but even then, Dinah will be the focus of that scene, not Hetty. Instead, Eliot focuses on Adam and the destruction of his personality. Hetty is less important to the novel now, perhaps, because she is less moral and less good. The novel is about how a good man deals with everyday life and then with extraordinary circumstances. Hetty represents an extreme because she is so deeply selfish. Adam, by contrast, is someone the reader can emulate, and that may be why Eliot focuses on him. Adam's destruction in this section is near complete when Mr. Massey explains the trial. Adam's personal appearance is failing in this section, and for a few chapters it seems that his courage wavers. He cannot bring himself to go visit Hetty, even though he believes that it would be the right thing to do. This Adam is a very different man from the one who once told Captain Manithern that he would never do something that was evil once he had decided it was the wrong thing to do. Adam here suffers, perhaps even to excess. After all, it is not his child who was killed, and Hetty was his fiancée, but not his wife and not someone he even knew well. What motivates Adam's near-total collapse is his sense of how useless this evil is, how unstoppably it progresses toward Hetty's death, and how impotent he is in the face of such evil. Adam is overwhelmed by the situation because his conception of right and wrong has changed. This is not to say that Adam is not also very much motivated by sympathy for Hetty and by a sense that everyone else has abandoned her. But the rapid nature of his anger and the depths to which he is affected stem from his sense that the ground is slipping away from beneath him. Adam is a man of action, and action does no good in this situation. The right thing no longer exists, and he flounders in a world where all his strength cannot prevent the destruction of his loved one. Captain Manithern journeys home after receiving a letter with news of his grandfather's death. After musing about what a good landlord he will be and how everyone will love him, his thoughts turn to Hetty, and how bad he feels for what happened. However, Captain Manithern is assured that her future is bright because she is marrying Adam. Because Adam bested him in their fight, Captain Manithern feels a little awkward toward him. In his view, Adam forced him to tell a lie. Yet he decides to make that relationship right as well. The journey is a comfortable one filled with self-satisfied reflections. When he arrives, the servants greet him. Speaking briefly with his aunt, he assures her that he will take care of her in her old age and then goes to his room to change. In his room, he finds a letter from Mr. Irwine detailing Hetty's plight. Bolting back out the door, he saddles up his horse. Dinah arrives in Stoniton and goes immediately to the prison to see Hetty. There she encounters the stranger who listened to her in the opening preaching at Hayslop. He helps her gain entrance to the prison. Dinah holds Hetty for a long time after she arrives, and when she speaks, she tells Hetty that God is with her and loves her. After Dinah asks Hetty to confess her sin and to open her heart, Hetty says she cannot. Dinah calls on the suffering of Christ and begs him to open Hetty's heart. Frightened, Hetty finally confesses her crime and tells Dinah how she took the baby into the woods to kill it, but she could not find a pool to drown it in. Then she saw a spot in a tree root and buried the baby there, hoping someone would find it. Ever since, Hetty still hears the baby's cries. She returned the next day to the spot where she buried the baby to see if it was still crying, but the baby was gone. Hetty asks whether Dinah believes that God will make her stop hearing the baby cry now that she has confessed. Dinah goes to see Adam to ask him to visit Hetty before she is executed. He says he cannot until the very last moment, but he promises to come the morning of her death if there has been no stay of execution. In the morning, Adam prepares to go see Hetty and realizes that it is the day that they were supposed to be married. Mr. Massey tries to comfort Adam by saying that some good might come of this suffering, but Adam reacts violently to that idea. From Mr. Massey's point of view, Hetty will always have suffered, so no other good can redeem that suffering. When Adam reaches the cell door, he is still so troubled that he is trembling. After a moment, he sees Hetty and is deeply saddened by her appearance. Consoling Hetty, Dinah urges Hetty to speak to Adam. Helpless and clutching Dinah, Hetty asks for his forgiveness. Adam says he forgave her long ago. Holding out her hand, Hetty asks Adam for a kiss for the way she's treated him. They kiss goodbye. Hetty's voice is firmer when she asks Adam to tell Captain Manithern that she cursed him once, but Dinah says she should forgive him or else God will not forgive her. Dinah rides out to the gallows with Hetty. At the sight of the crowd, Hetty clings to Dinah. They pray together and keep their eyes closed. The crowd is silent and stares on Dinah in awe. As they arrive at the gallows, a huge cry goes up from the crowd because a man has arrived on horseback. Captain Manithern arrives, and he has with him a stay of execution. The chapter opens up the day after Hetty was scheduled to be executed. Adam and Captain Manithern each go for a walk in the woods at the chase. They meet each other in the spot where they had their fight several months earlier. Adam does not excoriate Captain Manithern because he can see that Captain Manithern is suffering badly. They go to the hermitage, which has not been opened since the night of their fight. Captain Manithern announces to Adam that he plans to go away to join the army, and he begs Adam to stay in Haslop and convince the Poysers to stay as well, even though they had all planned to leave. He reveals to Adam that he wants to make the situation better and is annoyed when Adam does not immediately feel sorry for him and agree. Eventually agreeing to stay, Adam attempts to convince the Poysers to stay too. Captain Manithern also laments that he was unable to obtain a full pardon for Hetty and that she will be sent away from England for her crime. To thank Dinah, Captain Manithern gives Adam a watch to give her for all she has done for Hetty. After Adam leaves, Captain Manithern goes to the trash can and takes out Hetty's handkerchief from where he hid it several months earlier. The journey Captain Manithern makes back to Haslop contrasts with the journey Hetty makes in her attempts to find him. Captain Manithern's journey is luxurious. He rides in the fancy coach he can afford, meditating peacefully on his inheritance and on how he will improve his situation with Hetty. While his conscience is not entirely at ease, he does not make himself uncomfortable by spending too much time thinking about things that are difficult. Captain Manithern believes he is heading home, to the place where he is now master. Hetty's journey, by contrast, is on the road traveling by foot because she does not have the money to travel by coach. Troubled to the point of distraction, she has no real destination and no place she now considers home. The parallel shows the difference between the consequences of their affair in each of their lives. In fact, the two miss each other on the road by only a few days. The culpability for the affair probably rests more squarely with Captain Manithern, since he is the older of the two and because his social position makes him able to exploit Hetty. But of the two of them, Hetty is clearly the one suffering the consequences of the affair while Captain Manithern's life is still one of ease and luxury. The narrator promises to show the reader a workshop as it was in Haslop on June 18, 1799. Inside the workshop, Adam Bede, his brother, Seth Bede, Wiry Ben, and two other carpenters chat as they complete their work for the day. Seth finishes a door he has been working on, but he forgets to put panels in the door, because his mind is occupied with Dinah Morris, a Methodist preacher. Dinah will preach on the village lawn that evening, and Seth plans to see her. When he encourages the others to come with him to the preaching, they tease him about Dinah and about the inappropriateness of a woman's preaching. They also have a discussion about religion, which Seth defends as the most important thing in the world. Adam claims that doing practical good in the world, such as tending to a garden or building an oven, is as important as religion. After the workday is over, Adam heads home with his dog, Jip. In the village, people gather to hear Dinah's preaching. The tavern manager, Mr. Kesson, comes outside to see what the commotion is, and he meets a stranger on a horse. He and the stranger have a discussion about Dinah, and Mr. Kesson says he believes it is inappropriate for a woman to preach on the village green. As Dinah begins to preach, she draws in the villagers with her soft, loving voice, and the stranger stays to listen to her despite his reservations about a woman preacher. Dinah's sermon tells about the love Jesus has for the poor and encourages the townspeople to give up their sins and do good in the world. The villagers accept her slowly, and by the time she concludes her preaching, many of them are moved to tears. Seth walks Dinah home after her preaching. Dinah plans to go back to Snowfield to take care of an ailing old woman and regrets that she cannot stay in Hayslip to be with her aunt and to look after Hattie Sorrel, for whom she says she has been praying. Seth remarks that it is too bad Adam is in love with Hattie. Dinah says she cannot stay in Hayslip because God has told her that her place is in Snowfield. Arguing that together they can better serve God, Seth proposes marriage to Dinah. Declining, she says that God has destined that she should not marry or have children, even though she would like to do both. Dinah knows God's will because she has prayed for guidance and has opened up the Bible, and the first line she sees supports her belief that her calling is to help others. Although crying on the way home, Seth accepts Dinah's rejection. The narrator defends Seth's love for Dinah and says that although they are poor, unsophisticated Methodists, Seth and Dinah may have sublime feelings and should not be disregarded. Adam and Jip arrive home, where Adam's mother, Lisbeth, waits for them. Adam discovers that his father, who is a drunkard, has gone out without building the coffin he had promised to build for a family in town. After railing against his father, Adam stays up all night to finish the coffin, despite Seth's offer of help and Lisbeth's attempts to make him eat. Lisbeth and Seth talk while Adam eats dinner, and they both lament that Adam is in love with Hattie. Lisbeth becomes hysterical at the idea of Adam's leaving her. While Adam works, he hears a rap on the door twice, a sound he recalls his mother often referring to as an omen of death. The next morning, Adam and Seth take the coffin to town and, on their way home, find their father drowned in the stream by their house. Adam immediately feels guilty for the harshness with which he has treated his wayward father. The village of Hayslip and the villagers who live there form a running and richly textured commentary to the main action of the novel, which will involve only a few characters. Eliot takes care to describe even the most incidental characters with great attention to detail, and her depth of description suggests the importance of even the most minor views in the novel. Through their dialogue, Eliot exposes important themes and plot points that the main characters might have missed. The other villages are important because they fill in gaps in the main character's knowledge and sensibilities. For example, in the carpenter's shop, although only Adam and Seth will be continuing main characters, the others each express an opinion about religion, about Seth's love for Dinah, and about the propriety of a woman's preaching. Seth has not told Adam about his love for Dinah, and Adam has not been paying enough attention to Seth to really take note of his infatuation. The teasing of the fellow carpenters, however, introduces the information to the reader in a subtle way while still leaving Adam's character with his limited knowledge. Dinah's conversion of the villagers shows how simplicity, kindness, and love can effect great change in her peers where flashiness and preachiness would fail. Dinah's preaching is direct and understated, and it moves the villagers to tears and touches their hearts for precisely this reason. Dinah's gentle touch mirrors Eliot's own view of love of neighbor. Specifically, it reflects the idea that love is best used on those closest, and too much attachment to ideals only breeds discontent. Dinah's foil to this characteristic will be Hetty, whose attachment to the idea of becoming a rich lady will only bring her unhappiness. The narrator takes the reader to the home of Mr. Adolphus Irwine, the rector of Broxton, where Haslop is located. Mr. Irwine is playing chess with his mother, Mrs. Irwine, a socialite. Mr. Irwine is a bachelor because he has chosen to take care of his mother and two unmarried sisters, one of whom is chronically ill, rather than have his own family. Joshua Wren, the cobbler and parish clerk of Haslop, comes to see Mr. Irwine to complain about the Methodists and Dinah. In particular, Mr. Wren complains about the wheelwright, Will Maskery, who is a Methodist and has made disparaging remarks about Mr. Irwine and Wren. Mr. Irwine laughs off the insults and tells Wren to leave Maskery to his own business. As Wren is leaving, Captain Arthur Dynithern arrives to ask Mr. Irwine to go riding with him. Captain Dynithern is the grandson and heir of the local landlord, Squire Dynithern. Known throughout the village as the young squire, he is a dashing man who is staying at the squire's estate to recover from an injury in the army. Ram tells both Mr. Irwine and Captain Dynithern about the death of Thias Bede, Adam's father. Dinah repairs linens at her aunt's home, called Hall Farm. Mrs. Poyser, Dinah's aunt, scolds the maid for being lazy, even though the maid has been very industrious all day. She laughs when reminiscing about how much Dinah looks like the aunt who raised her after her mother died. Mr. Irwine and Captain Dynithern arrive, and Captain Dynithern asks Mrs. Poyser to show him her dairy. Captain Dynithern and Mrs. Poyser go to the dairy, where Captain Dynithern first lays eyes on Hetty. A beautiful young girl, Hetty is the 17-year-old niece of Mr. Poyser. The Poysers took her in after she was orphaned, and she lives with them at Hall Farm and helps Mrs. Poyser with household chores. Captain Dynithern flirts with Hetty, even going so far as to ask Mrs. Poyser to go get her small daughter, Totty, in order to have a few moments alone with Hetty. Hetty responds coquettishly to his advances. Captain Dynithern asks Hetty when she will next be at the Chase, where Captain Dynithern lives, and Hetty reveals her plans to visit the housekeeper at the estate the next day. While the others are in the dairy, Mr. Irwine chats with Dinah and asks her how she became a preacher. Dinah explains that she was once going to a nearby village with a preacher when that preacher fell ill. Because she felt moved by God, she stood in for him and has been a preacher even since. She explains that she chooses to live in the rougher country around Snowfield because she is called to alleviate the suffering of those who live there. Dinah also reveals that she works in the mill in Snowfield. Mr. Irwine does not chastise Dinah for her beliefs but treats her gently. When Mr. Irwine tells Dinah about the death of Thias Bede, she tells Mrs. Poyser and Hetty. Hetty is unaffected by the news, but Dinah resolves to go visit Lisbeth to try to comfort her. Chapters 7 and 8 display Hetty as Dinah's foil by the way they each interact with men. The conversation between Captain Dynithern and Hetty in Chapter 7 directly contrasts with the conversation between Mr. Irwine and Dinah in Chapter 8, where Captain Dynithern and Hetty speak of nothing in particular and yet intend another meaning entirely. Mr. Irwine and Dinah speak of very personal things and are straightforward and unflinching. From the very beginning, then, Dinah and Hetty are set in opposition. Dinah focuses on others, and she is serious and calm. Hetty focuses entirely on herself and is flirtatious and capricious. Her lack of concern on learning of Thias's death, when she should care more than Dinah because she is at least friends with Adam and knows he loves her, suggests in Hetty a deep selfishness that contrasts with Dinah's desire to help others. Dinah and Hetty also share several similarities, which heighten the contrast between the two of them. Both are intensely beautiful women who were orphaned and raised by an aunt. They are of similar ages and class, and both are single. Both will come to have a very important role in the life of Adam Bede, although how they feel toward him will be different. The differences in the characters of Hetty and Dinah lead to their different ends and make Hetty the closest thing the novel has to a villain, whereas Dinah is its heroine. Mr. Irwine and Captain Dynithern are also in contrast with each other, despite superficial similarities. Both men are single, but Mr. Irwine behaves chastely and with propriety toward Dinah, a beautiful woman, whereas Captain Denithern flirts shamelessly with Hetty. They are from the upper class, but both are poor because the squire does not give them more money. Mr. Irwine takes a genuine interest in the villagers, however, whereas Captain Denithern thinks of them more like amusing children. Both men seek to do good for others, but there is a critical difference in their attempts at charity. Where Captain Denithern desires to be thought of as one who does good, Mr. Irwine actually just does good wherever he can, regardless of the recognition involved. Mr. Irwine cares for his ailing spinster sister when no one else does. Captain Denithern largely ignores his spinster aunt. The presence of both Captain Denithern and Mr. Irwine in the novel is important because without Mr. Irwine, the novel might merely be a critique of the upper class. With Mr. Irwine's presence, however, Eliot makes it clear that good and bad are found in the upper classes of society. As Hetty continues to churn the butter, she daydreams about Captain Denithern and the lifestyle his wealth can afford. Although she is aware that Adam is in love with her, she does not return the affection because she is not attracted to his poor and simple lifestyle. She prefers the dashing figure cut by Captain Denithern. Captain Denithern and Mr. Irwine ride away from Hull Farm, and Mr. Irwine urges Captain Denithern not to encourage Hetty's vanity. Mr. Irwine also expresses his hope that Adam will marry Maryburgh, the daughter of the carpenter to whom Adam is foreman, because he believes they would make a good match and because the marriage would put Adam in a position to become the carpenter's partner. Seth strives to comfort Lisbeth, who grieves for her dead husband to such an extreme that she refuses to clean up or to eat and often expresses her wish that she were dead with him. Dinah comes to visit the Beds to help Lisbeth in her grief. Although Lisbeth resists Dinah's kindness at first, she gradually comes around to calling Dinah her daughter and says she loves her very much. Dinah draws Lisbeth out by talking to her of her own childhood. She coaxes Lisbeth to eat, helps clean up around the kitchen, and sleeps with her. Seth is very glad to have Dinah in the house and very much relieved by her ability to calm Lisbeth. Early in the morning, Adam rises to begin working and he hears Dinah in the kitchen, sweeping and preparing breakfast. He does not know who is in the house because he was asleep when Dinah arrived, and he secretly hopes that it is Hetty. Then he comes into the kitchen and meets Dinah, paying attention to her for the first time. He realizes how beautiful she is and is happy for Seth, who Adam suspects loves Dinah. Dinah blushes under his attentions and turns to pat Jip, telling Adam that she believes the dog has things to say that he's unable to articulate. Lisbeth insists that Adam be the only person to touch his father's coffin, so Adam stays home to make the coffin while Seth goes out to work. Dinah comes in to wish Seth a good day and to ask him to walk her home that night. Adam encourages Seth not to lose heart, that someday Dinah may come around to loving him. Captain Denithern dresses for the day and decides not to be at home when Hetty arrives to see the housekeeper. Resolving to go on the trip, he goes to the stable to order his horse ready but learns that she is lame. Then the captain chooses to visit a friend for lunch and not be back until after Hetty has left. After lunch with his friend, he changes his mind about seeing Hetty. Galloping back as fast as he can, Captain Denithern tries to catch Hetty when she walks through the woods on the way to the house. He meets her in the woods and speaks with her. When he mentions another of her suitors, Hetty begins to cry, and Captain Denithern is so moved by her distress that he puts his arm around her. He quickly recovers himself, however, when Hetty drops her basket, and he rudely and abruptly leaves her, at first vowing not to see her again when she walks back that evening. After thinking alone for an hour, however, Captain Denithern decides that he must see her after all, to correct the impression he gave her that afternoon, when he may have seemed to be a lover. Captain Denithern's inability to control himself and his rationalizations about his relationship with Hetty represent the consequences of bad behavior and carelessness in the novel, but they are portrayed in a manner that makes it hard to dislike Captain Denithern. The affair with Hetty is a very human failing, and Eliot's portrayal of Captain Denithern is not vilifying, even though his actions bring about the worst events in the story. Self-control and honesty with oneself are portrayed as important traits in Eliot's main characters. Unlike Captain Denithern and Hetty, Adam and Dinah are both deeply honest with themselves and with everyone else about their motivations and desires, and this characteristic distinguishes them from the minor characters. Captain Dunithern's biggest failures are portrayed in a gentle way. The description of his meeting with Hetty is fraught with tenderness, especially in the description of the scenery. Captain Dunithern's attempts to seduce Hetty could possibly be seen as despicable. Hetty is, after all, younger, less experienced, and in a socially inferior position to him. It is hard to see Captain Dunithern as a predator, however, when the first move he makes toward her is to comfort her in response to her tears. The sympathy Elliot engenders for Captain Dunithern, even as he commits the actions that bring about the crisis of the novel, is consistent with the idea that it is human obligation to love our neighbors, with their faults. The interaction between Adam and Dinah in the Bede kitchen foreshadows their love. Even though Adam makes her aware of her own body, Dinah does not lose her composure, as she will never allow her feelings for Adam to interfere with her feelings for Seth and her compassion for Hetty. The blush and the idea that Dinah can feel as a young woman also add an important component to her character. Her love for Adam, which really starts as more of a crush, makes her a full character, one capable of every human feeling. Adam's awareness of Dinah's beauty and his happiness for Seth suggests the way he will eventually come to love her, first as a sister and only later as a lover and wife. Adam's love for Hetty is foolish, but his love for Dinah redeems him, proving that he can love the better things in a woman and partner. Although his love of Hetty is based in his ability to see the best in her, it is also in no small part because of her beauty. His love of Dinah, by contrast, is based only on her finer qualities. By including this early encounter, Elliot hints at Adam's burgeoning love for Dinah, which will not come to fruition until the very last chapters of the novel. Hetty has been kinder to Adam, making him believe that perhaps she is coming to love him. Adam is overseeing work for the squire, and he must travel to the squire's residence, where Captain Dunithern is staying. One evening, the day before Captain Dunithern is to leave to meet up with his regiment, Adam encounters Captain Dunithern and Hetty kissing in the woods. Hetty runs off, and Captain Dunithern walks by Adam. He stops to say that he ran into Hetty, walked her part way home, and asked her for a kiss for his effort. Adam is not fooled and says that he knows Captain Dunithern has kissed Hetty more than once. Then Adam reveals that he himself loves her, and Captain Dunithern is horrified for a moment. Adam tells Captain Dunithern that he is a scoundrel, and Captain Dunithern punches him. Adam is the stronger of the two, and he knocks Captain Dunithern down. Adam immediately feels remorse and reaches down to help Captain Dunithern up, but Adam believes that he is dead. A few minutes later, Captain Dunithern regains consciousness, and Adam is so relieved that he rushes to help him. Together, they go back to the hermitage. While Adam runs to get brandy from the main house, Captain Dunithern picks up Hetty's handkerchief and shoves it into a trash can underneath the trash. When Adam returns, the two talk. Captain Dunithern feels that he has no choice but to lie to Adam about the extent of his affair with Hetty. Adam forces him to promise to write a letter to Hetty explaining that their relationship was never anything more than flirtation, that they can never be married, and that Captain Dunithern is going away. Captain Dunithern resists writing the letter, but Adam tells him either to write or to admit to Adam the extent of their relationship. Captain Dunithern chooses to write to her rather than to tell Adam the truth. Captain Dunithern wakes the next morning and contemplates the events of the night before. He does not want to write the letter to Hetty because he does not want to hurt her. However, he convinces himself that he will do good for her in the future and that she will come to owe him for his good deeds and forgive him the harm he has done her by seducing her. Captain Dunithern writes the letter and has his servant give it to Adam. In the letter, he includes a warning to Adam that the letter will hurt Hetty and that it might be better not to give it to her. Adam, who is deeply saddened that his benefactor has turned out to be a seducer, decides that he will be able to give up his thoughts of revenge against Captain Dunithern, but he will never be able to feel the same way about him again. Hetty worries about whether Adam will tell the Poyssers about her affair with Captain Dunithern. She is relieved when he says that he wants to see her alone. Adam tells her that Captain Dunithern has told him that he never cared for her, but she does not believe him. He gives her the letter from Captain Dunithern, and Hetty does not read it immediately but convinces herself that it must say something different from what Adam says. On his way home, Adam encounters Seth and apologizes for being gruff with him, Seth gives Adam a letter from Dinah in which Dinah ruminates on the importance of having sorrow in our lives so that we can feel what the rest of the world is feeling. Adam tells Seth that he hopes Dinah will come to love him and encourages Seth to go see her in Snowfield. Hetty reads the letter from Captain Anithern. In it, he tells her that she will never be his wife, assures her that she would have been unhappy because of their class distinctions anyway, and promises her that he will always do for her what he can. Hetty hates him for his letter and believes that her peasant life will never be anything but bitter to her again. Hetty longs for change and asks Mr. Poyser to allow her to become a lady's maid. He refuses. Mrs. Poyser is angered by the lack of gratitude reflected in the request. Hetty decides that maybe the only avenue to change is to marry Adam. Hetty's decision to marry Adam, as strange as it may seem, coming on the heels of her disappointment about Captain Anithern, reflects the true nature of Hetty's feelings toward Captain Anithern and Hetty's incapacity to love. To Hetty, love and marriage are merely means to an end, and that end is being physically comfort. Hetty's only concern, even in her love affairs, is a selfish desire to be happy and taken care of. Hetty's decision to marry Adam is a central fact of the book because it requires the reader to see Hetty for what she is rather than considering her to be a naive, young girl who was victimized by an older man in a position of power. Although it is true that Hetty is young and simple and that she was seduced, her inherently selfish nature shines through at this moment. She is at her least sympathetic when deciding that because she cannot become a lady's maid, she might as well marry a decent, hard-working man. This decision magnifies the hardness of heart Hetty demonstrated when she rejected Dinah's attempts to love her and give her advice, and it prepares the reader for Hetty's actions later in the novel. It also demonstrates the fact that Hetty simply cannot love but can only act in her own self-interest. The squire comes to the Poysers to ask them to give up some of their farming land in exchange for some additional dairy land. The squire wants the arrangement so that he can lease Chase Farm, and he flatters and wheedles in his attempt to get the Poysers to agree. Mrs. Poyser is furious and refuses the offer. She says she will not help him make more money while ruining herself. Mr. Poyser worries that he will kick them off Hall Farm when it comes time to renew their lease. He laments the idea of going to live among strangers when it has been the pride of his family that they have land. Mrs. Poyser tells him not to worry about that until it happens. Because Mrs. Poyser refuses to exchange farmland for dairy land, the squire is unable to rent out Chase Farm and is forced to take other measures. Villagers find this very amusing because the squire is universally hated. Mr. Irwine also finds the situation funny, but he is careful not to laugh about it for fear of getting on the squire's bad side. Adam continues to woo Hetty, who persists to show more interest in him. Because Mr. Berg was unable to replace him, Adam has been made a partner in the carpentry business. Adam is also tending to the squire's woods. As Hetty begins to show more affection for him, Adam's jealousy and hatred of Captain Anithern abate. As he walks with her one afternoon, Adam tells Hetty about his new partnership in the carpentry business. Hetty believes this means he will marry Mr. Berg's daughter, and her vanity is offended. She begins to cry. Adam realizes her misunderstanding and believes she is crying out of love, so he proposes immediately, even though he had planned to wait. Hetty, who seems more luxuriant lately, accepts. They go back to Hull Farm and tell the Poysers, who are ecstatic. Hetty gives Adam a kiss. Hetty has been going about her work more obediently than usual, and Adam is pleased because he believes that she will make a good wife after all. He notices, however, that she is sometimes unhappy. Hetty goes to a nearby market town to get some things she needs for the wedding. On the way, she sobs and dreads a coming shame. The narrator does not directly say that Hetty is pregnant. The reader comes to this conclusion after the narrator persists in mentioning that Hetty is so afraid. Hetty contemplates killing herself but is too afraid that when they found the body, people would know why she killed herself. The only hope for her, she concludes, is to go far away where people will not know her. Hetty decides to tell the Poysers that she is going to see Dinah in Snowfield and really to set off to find Captain Anithern, who she believes can help her, even if he cannot erase her shame. Adam sees her off on her journey, and Hetty cries. Adam believes her tears are evidence of her deep love for him, but they are actually self-pitying tears. Each time Hetty cries in the novel, something significant happens to those around her in response to her emotional state. The first notable instance of Hetty's tears is during the encounter with Captain Denithern, when her tears provoke so much pity in him that he kisses her, thus sparking their affair. In chapters 34 and 35, though, her tears cause Adam to propose and to feel deep sympathy for her at their parting. However, Hetty cries out of humiliation, out of fear, and out of vanity, and never out of truly deep sorrow or feeling for others. Hetty's tears come because they are a way for her to get what she wants, not unlike Totty's temper tantrums. Because she is beautiful, her tears move others to feel especially sorry for her and to do their best to make the tears go away. Other characters, who have at least as many troubles, do considerably less crying. Dinah, for example, never cries in front of others. Hetty's outward show of minor sadness when the world does not go her way signals her shallow nature, demonstrating just how frivolous she can be. The narrator never directly tells the reader that Hetty is pregnant. Instead, Eliot and the narrator hint at it, dropping clues for a thoughtful reader to solve. For example, the narrator describes a sense of luxuriant womanliness in Hetty, the result of her affair with Captain Denithern. Likewise, the narrator describes Hetty as feeling a sense of dread. Eliot carefully lays out the time frame so that readers can calculate how far along Hetty might be in her pregnancy. At the third trimester, when Hetty would be starting to show, she leaves the farm. Readers must connect her leave-taking with the pregnancy. Her situation becomes even clearer when Hetty resolves to seek out Captain Denithern for help in order to alleviate her sense of dread. This scene builds the emotion of the novel and aligns reader sympathy with Hetty. Her distress forces readers to feel pity toward her, even as she begins to make bad choices. 18 months have passed since Adam and Captain Denithern talked in the Hermitage. Dinah and Mrs. Poyser quarrel because Dinah says she must go back to Snowfield to help the people there, and Mrs. Poyser wants her to stay. Adam arrives and asks Dinah to come home with him to visit Lisbeth, who is ailing and asks to see her. Upon learning of Dinah's plans to leave, Adam is saddened but says he's confident that Dinah will always do what is right. Dinah blushes at his attentions and then starts to cry. She rushes off to get her bonnet, but Totty follows her and comes back announcing that Dinah is crying and praying. Adam and Mr. Poyser talk about Adam's business, which is going very well, and about his prospects of becoming sole owner now that Mr. Berg is getting older and feebler. Adam and Dinah walk to the beds together. On the way, Adam tells Dinah that he wishes she would stay and marry Seth, but he apologizes when Dinah becomes very agitated. Dinah instead asks after Captain Denithern, and Adam reports that Mr. Irwine read him part of a letter from him. Captain Denithern is very sad and has decided not to come home just yet. When they reach the beds, Lisbeth and Seth both notice that Dinah is upset, but neither of them knows why. The brothers retreat to the workshop, where Adam works and Seth daydreams. Adam does not chastise his brother. Since the sorrow of Hetty's disgraceful trial, he has grown gentler toward everyone. In the morning, Dinah tidies up the cottage before breakfast, and Adam comes down. When they both clean up his workshop, Dinah becomes very flustered when he is near her. Dinah takes her leave of Lisbeth. After bidding farewell, Lisbeth goes into the workshop where Seth is working on a box for Dinah, and she begins to berate him because Dinah is going away. Ignoring Seth's feelings for Dinah, she says she knows Dinah would stay if only Adam would marry her. Seth is appalled at the idea and feels confident that Adam does not love Dinah. Lisbeth accuses Seth of jealousy, and he is hurt. On Sunday, Lisbeth approaches Adam and suggests that he propose to Dinah. Adam is suddenly struck by the idea but does not trust his mother's belief that Dinah loves him. Puzzled, he goes out to meet Seth and asks him what he thinks. Seth does not think Dinah wants to marry anyone but assures Adam that it would be wonderful to have Dinah as a sister-in-law and that he would not be jealous. Seth also suggests that Adam might as well ask Dinah. She took no offense, after all, when Seth asked her, even though her answer was no. Adam goes to Hull Farm while the others are at church so he can see Dinah alone. After he confesses his love for her, she admits that she loves him too. When he proposes, however, she says that she cannot marry him because she does not think it is God's will. Her fear is that if she lives with him, she will cease to feel compassion for the poor and will not be able to help those in need. Adam argues that she will be able to help others better because she will be more filled with love, just as a worker can do better work with more knowledge. They agree that she will go back to Snowfield for a time to see whether God's will becomes clearer to her. Adam and Dinah walk out together in the fields, and they encounter the Poyssers. Mr. Poysser tells Mrs. Poysser that he believes Adam loves Dinah. Mrs. Poysser claims to have known this all along but says she does not believe Dinah will marry him. Everyone urges Adam to come to the harvest supper and Dinah to stay at least that long. Adam promises to come, but Dinah does not promise to stay. Seth's lack of jealousy toward his brother reflects his genuine love for both Dinah and Adam, and his intense desire that they should both be happy. He also places Adam and Dinah's happiness over his feelings for Dinah because he knows she does not reciprocate his feelings and even admits to Adam that he's given up hope that Dinah will be his wife. Seth's character is unlike any other in Adam Bede. Although Lisbeth rebukes him and he is always compared unfavorably to Adam, Seth maintains a happy disposition and a gentle touch through it all. Seth is motivated by his religious feelings and his love of his family. Although he proposed to Dinah at the beginning of the novel, Seth does not let his feelings interfere with Adam's because he will do anything for his brother. When Adam approaches him and asks what he thinks about him proposing to Dinah, Seth does not even question whether Adam loves her. Seth's presence in the novel, then, may be intended as an indication that there are other good men in the world besides Adam and that goodness does not always manifest itself in the same way. After all, Adam and Seth are very different. Whereas Adam is exceptionally industrious, Seth is a constant dreamer. Whereas Adam is strong-minded and quick with numbers, Seth is easily swayed in most things and slower than his brother. Perhaps most important, although Adam's pride is easily offended, at least in the beginning of the novel, Seth is patient and extremely humble throughout. Seth is a reminder that although Adam's particular qualities make him a good man, there are other combinations of qualities that make equally good men. Adam and Dinah, instead of being separated by the love they each felt for Hetty, are influenced by it. It may seem a little odd that Adam is able to fall in love with Dinah so quickly after the disappointment of his marriage hopes with Hetty and his near-total collapse at her trial. Yet Dinah is not separate from his feelings for Hetty. Instead, she was a crucial part of Hetty's last days in England. She bolstered Hetty's spirits after the trial, and by helping Hetty, she won Adam's affection. For Dinah, the conversion of Hetty is likewise important, and Adam was a major part of that chapter of her life. Adam acquitted himself admirably during the trial and ultimately showed himself to be compassionate and gentle when he spoke to Hetty at the jail. Dinah can love these qualities in him without being jealous or spiteful about his previous love of Hetty. Mutual sorrow brings Adam and Dinah together because it has changed the way they both see the world and allowed them to see the best in each other. Adam goes to the harvest supper at the Poyssers. The Poyssers have invited all their workers and others as well to come have a sumptuous meal and ale. Mr. Poysser is filled with goodwill as he watches the workers eat. Together, the table sings the harvest song, a drinking song with a set refrain in which all the other words are made up by each singer. The workers have their usual quarrels, but mostly everyone is happy and satisfied. Adam anxiously looks for Dinah, but she has already gone back to Snowfield. As Adam walks Mr. Massey home, they talk about Mrs. Poysser. Both agree she is a good-spirited woman, for all her sharp tongue. Adam cannot bear the suspense any longer, so he goes to Snowfield to find Dinah. As he rides, he remembers the trip he made to Snowfield to find Hetty, and it still makes him sad. He believes that Hetty's disgrace is a terrible, sorrowful event, but his love for Dinah is fuller because he has experienced its sorrow. Dinah is out preaching, but Adam follows her to the house where she is and waits on a nearby hill. When she walks by, he comes out from behind a hedge and softly speaks her name. She turns around and hugs him. As they both cry, Dinah tells him that it is God's will that she should marry him. They kiss. A month later, on a rainy November day, Dinah and Adam are married in a simple ceremony. All their friends are there and wish them the best. For Adam, the day recalls another day when he was to be married, but Dinah does not mind the tinge of sorrow on their wedding day. As he rides home after the ceremony, Mr. Irwine reflects that the news of their wedding will be good news to send to Captain Anithern. In 1807, Dinah calls to Seth in their cottage and tells him that Adam is on his way home. They gather up Adam and Dinah's 2 children, Lisbeth and Adam, and they all go out to meet Adam. Adam and Seth's mother has died, and Seth remains a bachelor who lives with his brother's family. Adam is returning from his first meeting with Captain Anithern, who has just returned to Haslop. When the family approaches Adam, he takes his son from Seth. The younger Adam goes to Adam very happily. Adam recounts his visit with Captain Anithern. The captain, who is now a colonel, is much changed, especially by a recent serious illness, but he is the same old Captain Anithern. Dinah is told that Captain Anithern also plans to come see her the next day, and she says she will be glad to see him. While he had hoped to see her preach, the captain is told by Adam that she no longer preaches publicly since the Methodists have outlawed it. Reacting angrily to this comment, Seth believes the Methodists were wrong to outlaw the women preachers, but Adam quiets him by saying that Dinah accepted this because it was best. Adam relates how Captain Anithern took the news that Hetty has died overseas, just when she would have been allowed to return to England. He says that Captain Anithern admits now the wisdom of Adam's saying there are some wrongs that cannot be made up. As the family arrives home, the Poycers are entering their gate. Dinah sends her daughter forward to greet them. Eliot devotes an entire chapter to the harvest supper to emphasize that no matter how great the scandal at the time, normalcy does eventually return to the lives of most people. Although it is clear that Adam's life will never be the same after the events surrounding Hetty and Captain Anithern, the workers, villagers, and farmers of Haslop return to their everyday lives, unaffected by Hetty's trial 18 months earlier. After the disruption that the novel suffered when the scene changed to Stoniton for Hetty's trial and the narration shifted to the multi-voiced telling of the trial, the story of the harvest supper represents a return to the previous form of the novel. Eliot indicates that the world itself is largely how people choose to see it. After all, although Adam's view of other people has changed dramatically since Hetty's trial, the people themselves have not changed much. That element of balance is an important piece of the compassion Eliot preaches throughout the novel. The option is available, she says, as to how people see their neighbors and how much they choose to love them. Compassion is always an option. The Harvest Supper also adds another layer of realism to Eliot's novel and offers her a chance to criticize those authors and artists who choose to ignore the reality of poor, rural life in favor of some idealized notion of the happy peasant farmer. It seems to be very important to Eliot that her novel portray poverty as it is. Most of her characters are poor, struggling on the edge of existence. They are not starving in the streets and are not dependent on the charity of others for their existence, but a bad harvest can destroy several years' work for them. Eliot shows them as their lives are and rejects the idea that poverty somehow sanctifies people or makes them kinder than others, or worse than others. Poverty is not a positive social force, and the poor live life in much the same way as everyone else. This picture of everyone else of the novel forms an important background to Adam, and it is a social commentary as much about Eliot's own time as about the time of the novel. Eliot warns against the dangers of not seeing others for what they are through the allegory of Adam's infatuation of Hetty, and at the same time she offers the most accurate picture she can of the common man so that those may see him as he really is. Captain Anithern's coming-of-age party begins. As she gets ready, Hetty tries on the earrings Captain Anithern has given her and wears the locket with his hair in it that he has given her but keeps it under her dress. People from the parish, including the Poycers, begin to arrive, and the chase, the squire's home, is consumed in a fair-like atmosphere. Captain Anithern and Mr. Irwine survey the dinner arrangements and discuss Adam. The squire has agreed to hire Adam to look after his timber. Captain Anithern complains about how little money the squire has given him for the party, but Mr. Irwine tells him that a quieter party will be more appreciated than a more raucous event would have been. The tenants come in to dinner, and they argue over who is to sit at the head of the table. Adam sits with the tenants, even though, as a craftsman, because of his new position tending the timber, he would normally sit at the lower table. He sees Hetty, who flirts with him because she knows Maryburgh, who loves Adam, is watching them. Captain Manithan comes into the dinner, and Mr. Poyser delivers a speech thanking him for all he has done for the tenants and hoping that he will soon come into his inheritance. Captain Manithan gives an acceptance speech and then toasts the squire and Adam. In his toast to Adam, he announces that Adam will be working for the squire, even though Adam has so far kept this information a secret because he has not yet had a chance to tell Mr. Berg, his employer. Adam gives a proud acceptance speech. Captain Manithan walks around the table, greeting the tenants. He does not dare to look at Hetty, who feels slighted. Captain Manithan, Mr. Irwine, the squire, Miss Lydia, and Mrs. Irwine, along with the Irwine sisters, take up their place on a raised dais near where the games are being played. Mrs. Irwine admires the party, the last she says she will likely live to see unless Captain Manithan soon marries. She tells him that if he does not marry a beautiful woman she will never forgive him. Mrs. Irwine has selected the prizes for the women winners. She gives the women only practical gifts because, she says, she does not want to encourage vanity in women of the lower class. Captain Manithan has selected the prizes for the men and gives them splendid gifts. After the games, Wiry Ben dances for the crowd, and the nobles laugh at him while Mr. Poyser and others look on with genuine admiration for his skill. Adam stays for the dance at the request of Captain Manithan, even though Lisbeth urges him to come home with her. He only wants to dance with Hetty, who only wants to dance with Captain Manithan. When Adam goes to Hetty to claim her for the dance she has promised him, she is holding Totty. When they transfer Totty to the maid, Totty grabs the string of beads on which Hetty's locket is strung, and it breaks, scattering all over the floor and sending the locket flying. Adam picks up the locket and notices the two different colors of hair inside. He gives it to Hetty, who is extremely agitated and embarrassed. Adam is miserable at the thought that she might have a secret lover, but he rationalizes on the way home that she probably bought the locket for herself and put pieces of her dead parents' hair inside with a piece of her own. On their way home, Mr. Poyser remarks to Mrs. Poyser that Hetty will one day be able to tell her children that she danced with a nobleman in his military dress. Although little seems to happen in the third book, these chapters actually serve as the central turning point in the novel. Captain Manithan's coming-of-age party is important for two reasons. First, the party brings into sharp focus the class issues that pervade life in Haslop. By bringing together all the characters in the novel, the third book allows the minor characters to take center stage, especially during Wiry Ben's dance, when Wiry Ben and other members of the lower class become more important than at almost any other time in the novel. A similar celebration comes almost at the end of the novel, in the Harvest Feast. Although it is not as complete a roster of the characters of the novel, at the feast, the reader gets a chance to see some villages of Haslop after the affair of Hetty Sorrel. Second, the party also displays the main characters in their last moments of innocence. Adam believes Hetty may love him, although the incident with the locket raises his suspicions. Similarly, up to this point the Poysers have believed that Hetty's worst faults are in her reluctance to do her chores, and everyone, especially Mr. Irwine, has believed in Captain Manithan's good character. All of that is about to change, and the narrator spends a good deal of time describing some of the villagers' impressions of Hetty so that the reader understands just how profoundly Hetty's downfall will rock the world of Haslop. The third book occurs during one half of one day and depicts the last time the characters are all together before the major events of the novel unfold, which largely take place between the action of the fourth and fifth books.